I sip my morning coffee, watching the sunrise spill gold across the Manhattan skyline, and for a moment, I let myself feel untouchable. The silk of my blouse brushes against my arm as I scroll through my emails, my phone buzzing insistently on the polished mahogany desk. Every notification feels like a ripple in a pond that I've worked so hard to keep calm. Then, an unfamiliar number flashes on the screen. I hesitate. Part of me wants to ignore it, the other part knows I can't. I answer. Jessica? It's Mom, we need to talk. The words land like a brick in my chest. Memories crash over me. The suitcase shoved into my hands, the slam of the front door, the laughter of friends I barely knew, my parents' voices shouting that I wasn't welcome. That day had defined me in ways I didn't realize until much later. I sit back, letting the mug warm my hands, and I notice the chipped nail polish, the faint aroma of coffee, the hum of traffic outside. I've come a long way since that day, far beyond the apartment I rented with my meager paycheck and the endless nights of worry. I built this life from nothing, secretly, fiercely, without looking back. And now, they want to talk. I let the silence stretch between us, feeling the irony pulse through my veins. The woman they dismissed is sitting here, calm, composed, untouchable, and in possession of secrets that could change everything. I still remember the day like it was yesterday, though I was barely 19. My bedroom smelled faintly of lavender and regret, the walls plastered with posters of places I dreamed of visiting, places my parents never seemed to care about. I had just graduated high school, full of nervous excitement, but apparently, my ambitions were a betrayal. Jessica, this isn't how we raised you, my mother yelled, voice cracking with frustration. My father stood behind her, arms crossed, like a judge I could never convince. I tried to explain, tried to tell them that I wanted to pursue something unconventional, something that mattered to me. But each word only seemed to push them further away. Finally, my mother grabbed a worn suitcase from the closet. Pack your things.
You're on your own, she said.
I felt my stomach drop, my hands trembling as I shoved my few belongings inside. The lump in my throat burned with humiliation and sorrow. I wanted to scream, to beg them to understand, but the words caught like thorns in my throat. Before I left, I turned to my grandmother, who had always been my secret champion. She pressed a small, leather-bound journal into my hands, her eyes gentle but firm. Write down everything, Jessica. Your plans, your dreams. Don't let anyone steal your fire. One day, you'll come back not just for yourself, but for everyone who doubted you. Her words wrapped around me like a warm scarf, grounding me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. I stepped outside into the crisp morning air, suitcase in hand, my heart pounding with fear and defiance. I had no money, no home, and no roadmap, just a spark of determination and that journal tucked under my arm. I remember the way the street looked, empty, quiet, as if the city itself was waiting to see if I would survive. And survive I did. That suitcase was more than just clothes and books. It carried my resolve, my first taste of independence. The sting of rejection, the sharpness of their dismissal, it all became fuel. I didn't just walk away from home that day. I took the first step toward becoming someone they couldn't ignore. I didn't know then that survival would become an art form. The first few months were brutal. I bounced between tiny sublets in Brooklyn, working 2 part-time jobs just to pay rent and eat. The journal my grandmother had given me became my compass. Every night, I scribbled ideas, sketches, business plans, even dreams that felt too big to be real. It was my secret map out of the uncertainty and fear, the ink tracing the outline of the woman I was meant to become. One evening, while closing the coffee shop where I washed dishes, I met Claire, a seasoned marketing consultant. She noticed my notebook filled with sketches for small online ventures. "You've got something here," she said, leaning over my shoulder. "Don't waste it. You've got potential. Let me help." Her faith was like a warm torch cutting through the darkness. With her guidance, I learned how to navigate the business world, pitch ideas, and negotiate deals. There were nights I doubted myself so completely that I wanted to curl up on the floor and give up, but every time, I opened the journal and read my grandmother's words. I started small, freelance projects designing marketing campaigns for local businesses. Each success, though minor at first, built a quiet confidence. My first big client came after months of rejection, a boutique fashion brand that trusted me to revamp their online presence. I stayed up late into the night, analyzing data, crafting content, testing every angle. When the results doubled their revenue in just 3 months, I felt a thrill I had never experienced in the safe confines of my childhood home. I celebrated privately, of course. I didn't post about it online, didn't boast in front of anyone who would later scoff or doubt me. Each small victory became a brick in the foundation of my independence. Within a year, I had enough savings to rent a modest office in Manhattan, hire a small team, and finally breathe. I was making more money than I had ever imagined, quietly building an empire from the shadows. By the time I hit 24, I had launched my own consulting firm. I had clients across the country, a growing reputation, and a team that respected my vision and work ethic. But my parents? They had no idea. Every family call ended with vague, polite updates. I mastered the art of pretending I was just getting by, letting them hold on to their assumptions, all while I built something far beyond their comprehension. The more I succeeded, the more the memory of that suitcase burned, not with pain, but with power. It was no longer a symbol of rejection. It was proof that I could rise from nothing. Every challenge, every sleepless night, every ounce of doubt had led me here. And soon, I would show them exactly how far I had come.
I remember the morning they arrived.
My parents had no idea what awaited them. The invitation I had sent was vague, just an afternoon coffee to catch up. I wanted them to walk into the life I had built, unfiltered, undeniable. The doorbell rang, and my heart ticked in rhythm with the sound. I smoothed the silk of my blouse, checked the sleek marble countertops of my apartment, and let my gaze wander to the view of the city skyline. Every detail of this space was a quiet statement. The modern art I had collected, the polished oak desk, the shelves lined with books and awards that represented years of relentless work. "Jessica," my mother's voice trembled as she stepped inside, my father close behind, hands stuffed into his pockets like a teenager caught off guard. They had expected a scrappy, anxious girl, maybe a student still clawing her way through life. Instead, they found me, confident, poised, a presence that commanded the room without a word. I offered them coffee, motioning to the minimalist espresso machine I had purchased after my first big contract. "Please sit," I said, my tone calm but layered with a weight they weren't ready for. They looked around, and I let them take it in. The artwork, the awards, the tidy office corner I had carved out for my growing business. The silence stretched, thick with the gravity of the moment. Their eyes were wide, scanning every detail, trying to reconcile the woman before them with the girl they had thrown out with a suitcase. Finally, I spoke. "You wanted to talk. Let's talk." I watched their expressions shift through disbelief, shame, and a flicker of awe. I placed a folder on the table. It contained contracts, business licenses, and financial statements. "This is my company," I said. "I started it from nothing. Every dollar, every client, every success, it's mine. And do you remember the house I left behind that day you decided I wasn't welcome?" I paused, letting the memory hang in the air. "I bought it. Every brick, every wall, it's officially mine now." My mother gasped. My father's jaw tightened, and for a moment, the silence returned, heavy and electric. They couldn't speak. The words would have felt inadequate, meaningless against the proof in front of them. I could see it in their eyes. The realization that the girl they had dismissed, the one they assumed would fail, had grown into a woman they had no power over. Their disbelief was almost painful, but I let it simmer. I wanted them to feel the weight of the choice they had made, the consequences of their judgment, and the truth of my resilience. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout. I simply let the evidence speak for itself. The polished office, the awards, the folder on the table, they were my words, louder and clearer than any argument I could have made. In that room, I was no longer the child they had rejected. I was a force, undeniable and self-made. And for the first time since that suitcase day, I felt the full, intoxicating taste of triumph, not revenge, but the satisfaction of proving that rejection could never define me. I leaned back in my chair, letting my parents' stunned silence settle like dust in the sunlight streaming through the windows. For years, they had held power over me with their words, their judgment, their expectations. Now, the balance had shifted. I had the upper hand, and I intended to use it wisely. "You've both made it clear over the years that you don't understand me," I began, keeping my tone calm but firm. "And I'm done letting your decisions define my life. But I also believe in growth, and I know people can change if they're willing. So, here's what I propose." I took a deep breath, watching as their expressions flickered between hope and hesitation. "If you want any part of my life going forward, not just as my parents but as people I respect, you will follow a few conditions." My father swallowed hard. My mother's hands trembled around her coffee cup. I continued. "First, honesty. No more hiding behind assumptions or judgment. I expect you to speak openly, respectfully, and without manipulation. Second, ambition. Pursue something that matters to you, something beyond convenience or comfort. I want to see effort, not excuses. Third, kindness, not just to me, but to everyone in your lives. Let go of the patterns that have caused pain and division." I could see the weight of my words settling on them, but I didn't soften. "These are non-negotiable," I added. "If you want to be part of my world, you have to meet me here, not the other way around." Then came the final point, and I let it land with gravity. "And yes, the house is mine now. But I'm not cruel. I will help make the transition smooth, but only if these conditions are met. This is about respect, accountability, and growth, not revenge." The room was quiet, heavy with introspection. I could sense their internal struggle, the sudden awareness that change would require real effort. I wanted them to understand that my power wasn't about money or ownership. It was about self-respect, boundaries, and the refusal to let old patterns control me. I watched my father's jaw soften slightly, my mother blink rapidly as tears threatened. The tension was palpable, but so was the possibility of transformation. I had given them rules, yes, but they were also a lifeline. A chance to rebuild trust, to earn their place in my life on terms that honored both of us. For the first time, I felt the satisfaction of setting boundaries without guilt, of combining firmness with compassion. The child they had dismissed had become a woman capable of love, leadership, and judgment. And now, they would either rise to meet me, or watch from the sidelines as I continued forward without them. I smiled softly, a hint of warmth threading through the power I now held. For the first time in years, the past felt firmly behind me, and the future stretched wide and bright, waiting for the choices I, and only I, would make. Weeks passed, and I watched the subtle changes unfold. My parents weren't perfect, they never would be, but they were trying. My father enrolled in a professional course he had postponed for years, something he'd always dreamed of, but never dared to pursue. My mother began volunteering at a local community center, finally channeling her energy into something beyond control and criticism. Each small step was a victory, not for me, but for them, and for the fragile bonds we were cautiously rebuilding. I sat one evening in the same office where they had first walked in stunned, the city lights glimmering against the window pane. My leather-bound journal, once a lifeline, lay open beside me. I traced my grandmother's handwriting on the first page, her advice echoing in my mind. "One day, you'll come back not just for yourself, but for everyone who doubted you." I smiled softly, realizing she hadn't just meant literal return. It was about showing the strength of perseverance, the power of resilience, and the beauty of transformation. I reflected on the journey. The suitcase that had once symbolized rejection now represented freedom. The nights I spent doubting myself, the small victories hidden from the world, the relentless pursuit of a life I believed I deserved, it had all led to this moment. I had become someone unrecognizable to the girl my parents had tried to push away, and yet entirely familiar to the woman I had always imagined. And I had learned something essential. Power without compassion is hollow, and compassion without boundaries is weakness. I could hold both firmly, with grace and with love. I had rewritten the rules, not just of my life, but of how I allowed others to impact it. I glanced at the house, visible across the street from my office, a silent testament to the life I had claimed, not just in ownership, but in triumph over the past. My parents had finally begun to understand that my strength was not rooted in revenge, but in self-respect, resilience, and the courage to rise above. I closed the journal, letting the leather cover click softly. My reflection in the window smiled back at me, calm, confident, and whole. I whispered to myself, the words carrying the weight of everything I had endured. I am the author of my story, the owner of my destiny, and the woman I was always meant to be. And with that, I turned back to the city, ready for whatever came next, not because anyone believed in me, but because I had never stopped believing in myself.